Welcome, brave souls, to Fear File Chronicles, your one-way ticket to spine-chilling stories and terrifying tales. Tonight, we'll be diving into the darkest corners of the human mind with the story, Rickets, Part 5. Penned by the twisted mind of Locked 334. Together, we'll explore the unexplained and face our deepest fears. But before we begin, if you enjoy trembling and terror, be sure to hit that like button. Share this video with your fellow fear fanatics and subscribe to our channel. Don't forget to click the bell notification so you never miss an eerie episode. Your support truly means the world to us, so feel free to leave a comment below to join the Fear File Chronicles community. Now, without further ado, let's unravel the mysteries of the unknown together as we delve into tonight's fear-inducing story, Rickets, Part 5. Dim the lights and prepare yourself for a chilling journey into the Fear File Chronicles. My mind sifted through tall grass again before my feet came to rest at the base of a familiar tree. My quivering hand rested on the worn wood of a handmade cross. The wind whipped around me and forced the boughs of the tree above me to bend to its will. Again, the sound mimicked a voice I knew, but my eyes were intent on the grave. I had somehow cheated death, and now death was all that surrounded me. From the cold dirt, gnarled fingers began prying free. They wriggled their way from the makeshift coffin and brushed away debris. Once again, my feet shuffled backward into the tall grass, away from the demon. It cried and wailed before bounding into the brush after me. I turned and ran, but in my panic, I tripped over something below me. The air was forced free from my chest as I woke to the sour smell of the motel room. My body jumped to the edge of the bed as my lungs begged for oxygen. It was morning, and I was safe. For now. I rose from the mattress and peered out into the street. I had slept long, and the sun was nearing noon. I needed to find answers. It took some effort to pull the door open to the room. The humidity in the air had caused the old wood to swell. I groggily made my way to the office where we had checked in. I knew that there would be a pot of coffee waiting there. The college-aged guy behind the desk was intent on his phone, scrolling through some social media as I entered. I grasped hold of a small styrofoam cup and poured the dark liquid into it before exiting back into the light of day. As I walked back to the room, I noticed that a newspaper had been abandoned on a bench nearby. I rested myself on the bench, taking a deep gulp of the brew before grasping the paper. So much negativity in the news. I flipped through the pages, but an image caught my attention. He was far younger in the image, but I could not mistake Hal. His obituary told a story of a lonely man who had few living relatives. It was almost as if the ad had been placed to notify anyone who might care of his passing. The viewing was to be held that night, and I wondered if I might find answers while attending. I made it a point to ask Earl about it when he arrived. There had to be a cure for my sickness. When Earl arrived, I presented him with the newspaper. He simply nodded, noting he had seen it earlier that morning and had intended to ask me if I wanted to attend the service. I agreed, which put a smile on the burly man's face. He said that Hal had not had very many surviving relatives, and that any friendly face at the service would be welcome. If only Earl knew that I was no friend to the recently deceased, he would not have bothered to invite me. If I did not think that I could benefit from attending, I would not have gone at all. Hal deserved to rot in hell for what he had done. I just had an overwhelming need to find the other two boys who'd been there that day. We had a quick lunch at a local burger joint, and my new friend introduced me to a few business owners in the town. He had hoped some of them could use some help, because he knew I would need a job. I lucked out when a small-town grocer had just placed a help-wanted sign in the window. Stocking shelves for minimum wage would not be glamorous, but it was a paycheck. If not for the curse that had befallen me, I would have been well on my way to turning my life around. I had to feign excitement for Earl's sake when he promised to pick me up for my first shift the following day. I could not focus on tomorrow, yet. That night was more important. The white button-up shirt my new friend lent me was a couple of sizes too large. It looked better than the ratty t-shirt I'd been wearing for the last few days. Earl sported a suit that seemed to beg for help. Over his massive form, I fought to hold back my laughter as he informed me it had been a few years since he had needed something formal. The two of us entered the small church, a few minutes after the viewing had been scheduled to start. I had not expected a full house, but I was truly shocked when most of the room was empty. The pastor stood near the casket, speaking to two older men. A small group of women adjusted flowers nearby. An elderly woman sat behind a piano to play a soft, somber tune. If I had not known Hal's dirty secret, I would have pitied the scene before me. Earl ushered me forward, and we approached the pearl white box that held Hal's body. Earl shook the hand of the pastor and the two men before leaning over the recently deceased. I could hear whispered comments of sorrow between silent sobs. I felt bad for the burly bear of a man. He simply did not know Hal like I did. One of the other men turned to me.
So, how did you know Halford?
My eyes shifted toward the voice, and I made a gesture as if taking a drink. The man seemed to understand. I asked the same and learned that he was a coworker of the recently deceased. I asked how long he had known Hal, but it was only for a few years. The man then directed me to the other gentleman, who had returned to the first pew and was resting his face in his hands. I was told that Bill had been friends with Hal since childhood and was very upset with the news. I nodded in thanks and turned to talk with the other man. It was time for answers, and hopefully Bill would have them. The wooden seat beneath me creaked as I let my weight down upon it. Bill cut a gaze through his fingers in my direction, scanning my face for recognition. There was confusion there as he searched for words. He did not know me, and I knew being blunt with mixed company could prove tricky. My hand clapped on Bill's back, and I offered my condolences in a hushed tone. He offered thanks in return and asked how I knew his friend. I began telling the story of the crash and then attending the meetings. I explained that Hal had invited me to stay with him when he noticed I did not have somewhere to sleep. He nodded knowingly and commented that it was nice for me to show up even though I did not know his friend very long. I reassured Bill that I knew enough before passing him a small sliver of paper that I had prepared ahead of time. Earl and I exited the church soon after. I gave Bill a final glance before pointing in his direction. We stepped out into the evening air, and I told Earl that I wanted to walk since it was such a beautiful evening. He nodded and reminded me to get some rest before my first shift at the grocery store. I promised I would, as he started his truck. With a wave, he was gone. I waited for the truck to be out of sight before I stepped back toward the church. I leaned against the structure, patiently awaiting Bill. His reaction would be all that I needed. After a few minutes, the old man came scrambling through the doors as his eyes searched the area. I watched from the shadows as he descended the steps. His frail voice whispered into the night air, the single word that I had written in scratched letters on the piece of paper, the same word that had haunted me over the last few months, the word that called for vengeance. I could see the light from the post lamp reflecting in the salty specks on Bill's cheeks. I stepped forth from the darkness and whispered the words in tandem with him. Rickets, Rickets, Rickets. The old man almost jumped out of his skin as he turned toward me. His eyes quickly focused on the shiny metallic object in my hand. His mouth began quivering and begging for mercy. I placed a finger over my lips to instruct him to be silent as I guided the man into the trees behind the church. This had to end. Bill begged for his life for a while. But when the gruesome figure emerged to lay claim to his life, he knew it was useless. I asked about the third boy, but cancer had already taken him a few years prior. Rickets appeared disappointed at this. Bill had been tending the flowers and replacing the headstone for years in an attempt to atone for his sins. The scales were not even, however, and Rickets pounced upon the screaming man. I watched for a time before I continued onward through the forest. As I approached a creek, I tossed the revolver into the murky water and exited the trees opposite the church. I did not want to be spotted near the body, and I was sure Bill's wails of pain had drawn attention. It took about an hour for me to walk back to the motel, so once I was able to flop onto the mattress in my room, I gave a deep sigh of relief. Justice had been done, and hopefully I would be able to rest. My mind replayed the events of the last week on repeat, as my eyes followed the slow turning of the fan blades. It was not long before I drifted off to slumber. I was able to sleep peacefully for the first time since the crash. The next few months were spent working during the day, sleeping at the motel, and attending regular meetings. When I was able to save enough money, Earl helped me buy a used car and suggested we celebrate the occasion. We had pancakes. My next milestone was finding my living situation. Earl reassured me that he was fine helping pay for the motel until I could. I was just ready to be self-sufficient again. Despite the horrors I had endured, my life was looking up for once. Everything was falling into place, little by little, and I finally worked up the courage to call my parents. My mother was ecstatic to hear from me. She cried as I told her my story and invited me over for dinner that night. My father even surprised me by congratulating me on my sobriety. It was a dream come true. I even mentioned it to my fellow Alcoholics Anonymous members, and they were happy for me. So, when night fell, I gave myself a good shave, put on something decent, and headed toward the house I grew up in. The smile on my face could not be hidden. I could not remember the last time I was that happy. My tires came to a stop in the driveway, and all I could think of was how lucky I was to still be alive and to be able to come back home. That was when my stomach began to churn. An awful sickness rolled in my belly, and those words started playing on repeat in my head again. As I approached the front door, I tried to shake off the feeling. Tonight was supposed to be a good night. I was back home. That foul demon would not ruin this for me. My knuckles rapped on the door, and within seconds, my mother pulled it open. I was pulled inside and drawn into a tight hug. She squeezed me tight and began to cry, which in turn caused me to break into tears as well. My father then patted me on the back while fighting back his urge to sob. They pulled me into the dining room, where a feast had been presented on the table. My father pulled out a chair and beckoned me to sit. My mother began spooning heaps of food onto my plate while commenting on how skinny I had become. My father began telling stories from work. I forced a smile as their words became muffled by the slow chorus of chants in my mind.
Rickets, Rickets, Rickets.
It was maddening, but I was determined not to let it ruin this reunion. It grew louder and louder until it was deafening. My parents noticed the growing furrow on my brow and started asking if I was all right. That was when the lights began to flicker wildly, and a roaring wind caused the shutters outside the windows to clamor wildly. My father rose from his seat and headed to inspect the ruckus while commenting that the forecast had not called for a storm. My eyes followed his form, and I noticed the shadowy figure looming on the front porch. Then the lights went out. Some of us are not entitled to happiness. Some of our sins can never be forgiven. Hal and Bill paid their price. I thought I had paid for mine. The truth is, I do not think I ever can. As I write this, I am drunk for the first time in so long, but it is the only thing that numbs my pain and deafens the noise in my mind. Earl keeps trying to get me to come back to the meetings, but I am too afraid to. I do not know who will be next, and I do not want to be responsible for the death of anyone else. My parents did not deserve it. It was part of my punishment, though. I am not sure how long I can go on this way. The nightmares come and go. I am afraid to get close to anyone else. The voice comes anytime I have a moment of levity. It waits in the shadows of my mind. After saving enough for this pistol in my hand, I quit my job. The only answer I can think of resides in the bullet chambered in it. As I said, maybe this will be my salvation. Maybe it will be a warning to the rest of you. Be careful who you cross. Rickets, or whatever this demon is, waits patiently, and this seems like my only way out. I am sorry. Well, my friends, we've reached the end of tonight's chilling tale, Rickets Part 5, by the talented Locked 334. I hope you've enjoyed our descent into darkness, and that you'll carry a piece of the Fear File Chronicles with you as you drift into uneasy dreams. If our story left you shivering and shaking, don't forget to like this video, share it with others who crave a good scare, and subscribe to the Fear File Chronicles for more haunting horrors. Remember to hit the bell notification, so you're always among the first to know when a new nightmare awaits. As always, we appreciate your support and would love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Sharing your fears and frights with us truly means a lot, so don't be shy to engage with our sinister community. Until next time, remember to embrace the darkness, for it is within the shadows that our most terrifying stories are born. Good night, and stay scared.